So this is about maybe 15 years ago I made this document. This is like, I was studying at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and yeah, I have this interest in sound and architecture. My family's comes from, I have a long architectural background with my family. My father's an architect, my brother's an architect, my grandfather was an architect. My great-grandfather was a bridge builder, and so I have this history there. So it's maybe a bit Freudian, some of the work I do. But then I also played in bands, and of course I played bass guitar, and I was really into low frequencies and things. And then I sort of combined the two, and I thought like, wow, what would be the ultimate bass? And I thought like, you could use buildings and structures as your kind of bass guitar, you know, so at that point I developed two systems. It was basically a top system for vibrating buildings. So I make these mechanical oscillators that basically put sine waves into structures. You can fine tune them. So multiple oscillators up to like 24 or so attached to structural elements of buildings. And what this does is a bit like a clapper in a bell, in a bell tower. If you ring the bell and it makes the resonant frequency of that structural object. Well, I kind of do the same thing with buildings or bridges or towers or different kind of objects like that. And so most of these frequencies, because the object's so big, is very sub-frequency, low-frequency sound. Some of it you don't even hear, you just feel in your body. And so I wanted a system that I could sort of tap in and record these events. So then I came up with a recording system, which is, this is the basic version of it, kind of a kit of parts to record some of these vibrations. So these are like seismological sensors that we use to record earthquakes and to do seismological ground exploration, like searching for oil deposits or mineral deposits. And then these are some accelerometers and low frequency microphones, and then various recorders. Here's all like old tech. That's like a cassette recorder there. You see it, and then so I had kind of the two systems, and then I would work with them together. And then slowly I've just been developing this project along with a lot of other work, of course. And now sometimes I just use sound systems to put energy into buildings. So systems like this, I mean much bigger, like in clubs and stuff, and using those systems to pump sound into it, and then using seismological sensors around the building to sort of pick up that sound, and then cycle it back into it. So we kind of create this performance space of resonant energy. And what that does is it creates a kind of what I call sculptural sound, a very sub-frequency, low-frequency sound that you feel, and that as you navigate through it, it's almost like you can hug the sound. Like it has this kind of physical presence as you go into active nodes and unactive nodes, which can be really interesting. And sometimes quite, well, some people get afraid of it, you have to escape it. But sometimes you can't escape it because it's in the architecture. So even if you leave the room, you might go downstairs and still feel like another node of heavy energy somewhere. So it travels in strange ways. So one of the first pieces I did was this kind of a fucked up picture, but anyway, this is called the Live Room. This was actually a laboratory at MIT that they developed guidance control systems for the Atlas rocket, which is basically the rockets they shot off to the moon, and they also use them for ICBMs for putting nuclear warheads on. So they were making these big gyroscopes in this space, and you can't really see it, but these are all like aluminum panels for the floor, and then these are little concrete islands that are floating on their own kind of isolated foundation. And that's where they would put these testing benches on to test their gyroscopes, because they really needed it to be isolated. So what I did is I used this kind of artificial floor to tie in with these vibrational machines and turn the whole space into kind of a giant trampoline of energy. And I could tune it up with this system here, which are basically some very basic rheostats that I could control, speed control. And then I would have the audience come in, and then I would have occasionally like musicians come in with instruments that they could vibrate their instruments and play along with it. So that was sort of the start of this work. And that must have been in like 98 or 97 or something like this. And then I came out to Holland to do a project for V2 or V2 in Rotterdam for the Deaf Festival. Yeah. And so that was back when they had this space. I guess I have it still, but there used to be the old NRC publishing house, the newspaper, and they had these giant columns going through the building. Like I think it's a 7-story building, and then the ground floor is where they had the printing presses, and it was a two-story space or quite high space with these monster columns made out of steel and concrete. And so I came in with some of my machines and just strapped them onto these columns, and then I could just turn these architectural columns, like forks going through the building, into kind of giant rubber bands, you know, like as a vibrating element, and I could just drive energy through the whole structure. And what these frequencies can do can mess with your head a bit. And the offices for V2 were up at the top, and they said a lot of the energy was coming up there, like when the system was operating. They would be working in their office and their computers would be kind of vibrating around and things. And then the person who was doing the financial tabulations had a problem with this mental reasoning. In order to count money, normally he would like count it twice, but he had to count at least 6 times in order to get it correct. And then even then he still had to escape. So it wasn't on all the time, but this was another iteration of what I call the live room. And this one was in the Heppaard, Trojan Heppaard in Den Haag. Heppaard. The horse. The Trojan Horse. Heppaard. That's my bad Dutch, so. But no, this was they were doing a renovation. Well, actually OMA and Rem Koolhaas was doing the renovations for it, but before that happened they had to tear down the old building. So they allowed me to do the kind of final project there. And so I wired up the building with different mechanical oscillators, and you could just play the whole building basically like an instrument. And then this was a kind of a brick wall that was maybe a meter thick, and this is the kind of cracking action that would get happening. Break the building. Yeah, this one I had to turn this one off because they were worried that it was going to collapse, and then part of the building where the audience was did collapse, like part of the floor and stuff. So, but that was the idea. They wanted to tear this building down anyway. So sometimes they give me projects to destroy architecture. At least try. Huh? Well, yeah, they're a bit heavy, you know. I only came here like at spur of the moment. I only had a few hours to prepare. You know, so. Now this is a kind of another demolition project in Malmo in Sweden, and this was in a place called the Roseum, which was used to be it was a giant kind of art hall museum, but it used to be a power plant, and they had generators in this hallway, and then of course the generators were gone. There was an exhibition space, but then they had a new director named Charles Esch, who's now at the Van Abbe Museum in Eindhoven. And so when he was there, he invited me to do this project of kind of removing this wall. He didn't want it there anymore. So I called it the stark act of removal, or the strong act of removal, whatever. And so they have this kind of a crane overhead that still worked. And then I mounted some of my machines on this wall, turning it into kind of a giant vibrational diaphragm. And so tune that up as a kind of to a nice resonant frequency, producing a lot of energy, and then use this crane. Well, that's me there. To basically yank it up, and then draw this vibrational plane down the space back and forth with this audience. And what happens? You get these kind of different compression waves hitting different parts of the space and the wall, and then so it was quite strange performance. So one person actually said it looked like I was playing with a giant Game Boy, which was kind of funny. But so I had to bring it down to one wall, and then it would hit the wall, and it would kind of vibrate against the wall, and then it would bring it back the other side. and then eventually I would have to take it down. And this wall was maybe 6 meters tall by about 8 meters wide, and weighed multiple tons because it was all steel in the middle of it. So I was pretty freaked out by it, and we hadn't tried putting it down yet. So, and there were some really fucked up people in this audience, like really drunk, like trying to push it around. So sometimes you get these really strange physical actions from spectators. But anyway, I pulled it down, unfortunately, and then we put it on the ground, and then I let it shake on the ground a bit, and then we stopped the performance, and then that became the kind of stage for the next part of the exhibition, which was involving local bands to come in and use it as a stage to perform on. And, this one was in Groningen, using earth flattening machines, rollers that had diesel engines on them, and they also would vibrate. So normally you pull them behind a tractor and they would just compact the ground. Instead, I just ordered 3 of them, tied them together in the middle, and then we had them kind of vibrate together into the ground. And of course, because they're mechanical, each frequency is slightly different, so you get these strange harmonics happening in beat frequencies. And I had a guy make, with some earth moving equipment, make this kind of arena. It actually used to be a gasfabrik, and so that was kind of a land that was very toxic that they were trying to clean up, and that was the only clean part of it. So I called it the angel machine, to kind of bring back a certain non-toxic environment. And then we had some lights, kind of for the arena. And then eventually it would vibrate, and they would vibrate down to the ground where they would just sit like this. And then these big rollers would just roll on their own, just through the vibration very slowly. And then you'd see cracks in the ground, and people would lay down and kind of get a kind of vibrate action on their body. But the cool thing about it is that they they leave a wake, like how do you say it? Well, they're basically like ships on the sea, only they're ships on land. And if you let them go somewhere, they will leave like if you're in a boat and you leave your wake, your waves behind you, you see where you've been. It does the same only with the earth, which is quite nice with this kind of vibrate action. This was, we're talking about 9/11. This is a piece called the Geosite Portable Earthquake, and it was in Tilburg during 9/11. I was actually driving down, well anyways, what it involves is 3 very large, kind of, let me explain. Basically, the idea was I had 3 large mechanical oscillators attached to 6 meter long steel plate, buried into the ground, everything covered up like that. And we had a photo sensor, or a motion detector sensor, so it only would turn on when someone was on this terrain. So I had it all set up, and then I had to go down to do some fine tuning, so tune the frequencies of it to make it just right. And as I was going down, my girlfriend called me up. Hey man, you know what happened? You heard about this thing in New York? And I tuned it to the BBC, and I was like listening to basically like this horrific event. And then I'm going down there, and I think like, oh shit. But I still had to do this work. And I get down there, and there's kind of residential area around it. And like every fucking TV had collapsing buildings on it, from the 911. And I was like, oh fuck, I don't really have the heart to tune this thing, because when you turn this thing on, it really just shakes land for within maybe almost a kilometer in diameter, because it really travels through the ground. Like I would have people coming from me from maybe 500 meters away saying like their house is shaking, little things were happening in their kitchen and things. And so I didn't really have the heart to sort of create this major earthquake while they're watching buildings collapse on their television. So I kind of just got in my car and went back up and dealt with it later. But it was a good machine, it worked well. And then one thing I like about working in Holland is people are pretty, like if I did this in America, I'd probably get sued for it, but here in Holland, people are so like, kind of, yeah, it's art, I can understand it now, and they let me do this, and they're not as long as I don't piss them off too much, it's actually all right. So that was the earthquake machine. Yeah. I do have some videos, yeah, but it should be on YouTube. Anybody want to be a stagiaire for me? I have lots of stuff to put up on YouTube. No, it's not on right now. No. I mean, there probably is, but I'm not going to look for it right now. Yeah. Well, one reason why I don't show videos is that it I find it takes away from it because it's a compromise. First of all, the sound doesn't work because the sound's really compromised, and then you just get the kind of video effect. I think it's better when you see a picture and I make a description and you have something in your head that's kind of an idea of it all. And otherwise, you just have to come to your other shows. But you can Google it. No, it's okay. I don't mind. All right. So this is a man-made island in Aymoudi. It's right at the Delta or the Gulf, or the entrance of the Eye River, I guess. Noordzee Canal, yeah, actually. And anyway, so man-made river, originally part of the defenses for Holland, military fort, and then during the war, the Germans came in and installed some cannon mounts. Well, they took it over. So it was a mixed German-Dutch installation. So I came in and where they mount these big cannons, where the Nazi cannons had this kind of what's called Todt construction, T-O-D-T, which is a designer who made this kind of chalk out structure stuff. Normally it would be like a 6-meter long cannon in there. So there was no cannon, so I decided to build a kind of custom wooden bass horn inside of that thing. Using the whole Todt architecture as part of the curvature of the horn. So the whole space became essentially like a loudspeaker. Even behind it, when you walked behind the speaker, that was part of the acoustic design. And then I used some of my seismological sensors to basically plug into the ground of the Dutch part of the fort, which is all underground. So I drawed up all this kind of liquid sound of the earth, and then pummeled it through this throat, and then threw it off over the North Sea. And so very loud, very intense. And the thing about bass frequencies is they travel very far, and also over water they travel very efficiently. So you get these kind of rolling sounds. So I kind of likened it to like taking the sound of the Dutch fort and throwing it through the throat of the German Nazis or something like this. It's like a spewage of sound. But it was quite cool, like when these ships would go by, you get this reflection sound off the ship. And then on top of that, you would get a kind of feedback effect, because you would hear the ship coming through the water, and then through the ground, and then getting picked up through the sensors, and being fed out again. So it was also this kind of giant feedback loop. That's the inside. Well, this is just a kind of a monitoring station. These are chairs, Eames chairs that are hooked up with vibration transducers that you can sit on and feel certain environments that they record, vibrational environments. Again, this is using vibration, but as a kind of museum bench, using the sound of the architecture. This is in Paris at the Beaux-Arts Academy, or exhibition space. Same machine, but at the Boymans in Rotterdam. As you see, chicks dig it. But anyways, this whole this whole platform. Actually, it was not even that. The curator came up to me afterwards and said, like, yeah, it's like, it was really the senior citizens who came in. They loved it a lot. The old people, and Japanese tourists also liked it a lot. Apparently. But anyway, so. This was the live sound of the tower from the Boymans Museum. There's a kind of a light tower outside, fed down directly to the exhibition space, and then plugged into this museum bench, and you could feel the live sound of the building, essentially. It was always changing through the day. Well, this is kind of a weapon, sound weapon device. Not really a weapon, of course, but it looks like it. This looks like a, well, I'll show you. Here's what it looks like when you use it. This is called the Acoustic Space Gun. And what it is a very long directional microphone with a portable amplifier, preamp kind of system here, with batteries, volume control. Oh, and a delay unit. And this is a focused sound projector that you can project sound in a very narrow way. So basically what you do is you take it out into space and you can record things like conversations really far away and then project that sound completely behind you. And you can delay it with the delay so you can kind of fuck with time a little bit. And when you take it into kind of urban spaces, it looks quite strange, or sounds quite strange, because people will suddenly hear the conversations kind of projecting off of walls somewhere else, you know. So kind of, well, I'll talk about this more, but it came to me from reading a text by William Burroughs, who was a kind of famous beat poet from America. He wrote this text from the 70s called The Electronic Revolution, and he was always talking about how you could create a revolution by just playing back the sound of a revolution in public space. Or his ideas were, I mean, it's all poetic and kind of conceptual idea, but he also thought like, yeah, if you play back the sound of an accident, like cars hitting each other, maybe that creates an accident or something like that. So I like this idea of using public space and kind of to twist the acoustics up slightly. Not even that much, not even to make it even sonically present, just something in the background that kind of messes with your perception a bit. So this was kind of inspired by that text. And I have another piece I did in Istanbul that also relates. This one's called the Sonisphere. It's kind of a hybrid speaker system I developed that tries to visualize what the sounds feel like. So I had this at, well, this was in Germany. I had it also at Sonar Festival in Barcelona and a few other places. But basically it's like a 6-meter tall inflatable sphere with massive speakers inside and sensors around the terrain, and then feeding that live sound of the terrain into this globe. And then the speaker acts like a kind of 3-dimensional radiator of vibration. That's what it looks like in real life. So that's kind of the idea, is to have this kind of portable system, but it's also physical and big. You know, it gives a kind of visual element to the, and tactile also, I should say, element to the sound, instead of just being, you know, something coming out of a box, or whatever. I also had this in Venice at one time. That was kind of nice. This was in the Rathaus in Cologne. That's where the politics happened. In this kind of crazy empty space that was surrounded by the city hall that no one really used. So I kind of created kind of speakers place. Someone might give a speech, but no one gave a speech. I just had these massive speakers in there, and the sound basically feeding back, but I had this filter network that would listen to feedback, and every time it would go out of control, like it was here, it would pull down that frequency, and then it would let another frequency up, and then pull that one down automatically. So it was always trying to fight with feedback. I also had some ground vibration sensors on that. So there's always this constant struggle of speaking and then being pulled back. And eventually it was kind of a self-modulating composition, and it sounds, well, someone described it as the sounds of mermaids, whatever that would sound like. But kind of gives you a good picture of what it could be like. But it's kind of a nice way to work, because it's not like you're dealing with just, you know, play the CD. You know, it's like live sound, and it's got this automation of tension just by varying amounts of what these frequencies controls are doing. So it was nice. You just set it up and let it go, and you come back and you just, oh, that's a new sound. So these are, I've used these in different projects. These are nice. These are called acoustic wave cannons from Bose company in America. And they're very strong, low frequency subwoofers, but they're encased in these 3-meter long tubes, and so you can kind of put them outside and they're sort of protected by the weather. And these microphones, I had some very nice microphones, but I didn't want damage, so I used condoms to protect them. I recommend it. If you want to protect your microphone outside, put a condom on it. It works really well. So, this deals a bit with Sphere. This was sold to MIT also. This was called the Sniffer. A sniffer is like in hacker speak is like something that's looking for data in the network. And so this was placed at the MIT Media Lab, which is where all the high-tech dudes hang out and create what I call, they create solutions waiting for problems. That's what the Media Lab's about, I think. Sometimes, not all the time. We do some really good stuff. But what this had was a really wideband radio frequency receiver, a wideband radio frequency antenna. This kind of, I don't know, submarine-looking object suspended in the atrium space, and these little slits are these are actually speakers, so sound comes through these apertures. And basically, this thing just automatically runs through all the radio spectrum frequency that could possibly hit this space, and then just spits out audio. And it's just constantly just sniffing around for any kind of data. So we'll pick up data from Wi-Fi, from telephones, from satellites, from radio transmission, but it was all data. It wasn't like any voice stuff. It was just the gnarled sound of what like a modem sounds like. You used to start up modems on the computer. It's kind of this gnarly digital spew. And then when I had this playing, it was like the people working in the space were kind of really paranoid because they thought I was like checking out their email and stuff like this. But they were just having this sound. I mean, theoretically I could have, yeah, but he wants to read the stupid email. So that's the Sniffer. This is a piece I had in the old smart space. I had two devices, one of the megaphone and one of the microphone, directional microphone and a megaphone and a mobile phone attached to each unit. So I had one here and then through the other space there, and then I had two phone numbers just advertised in like some free newspapers. It's like chat lines. Hey, call up and call somebody. So two numbers, and people would call up and they could talk to each other through the space. And then they weren't aware that the fact that the space was a public space, so that the people in the space could hear people talking to each other. And it was like kind of this really weird. Most people would call up and get really pissed off. It's like, what is this? And then, but it was kind of a social, private, public device. Yeah. Just another picture of it. Mobile phone on the wall. This is also, the directional microphone using parabolics. This is the Omni sound generator. I don't know, there's a picture of it I don't need to have here, but it's a cool device. This is a sound generator for Wurlitzer organ. Basically, it's like every sound on the keyboard as a reed being blown with a fan. And so every sound on the keyboard's down, and then these are air tubes. Goes to this kind of air mixer, and then you get these air tubes to your headphones, and it's like putting your head inside this machine. So it's kind of a strange sound of every note on a keyboard. It's a kind of drone. Well, this doesn't really relate to sound. This was a 6-meter invalid chair going out my studio window at the Reichsakademie. It was kind of cool. It's like alternate architecture. So take the window out, put a chair through your window, and then half in, half out. That's my brother hanging out on outside. So there was this kind of in-between space. This kind of, no one used this space. Kind of it was next to the canal and the truck, and then so I just thought like, hey, it's kind of a nice garden to hang out. I go out in my studio and read the newspaper and stuff like this. So. This was in Genk, in Belgium. A piece called the Sound House. Basically, they gave me a building to destroy. We wired up with machines, and it became really public. Like it was like me against Belgium. I don't know. Someone told me afterwards, like the Belgians are born with a brick in their stomach. Have you heard this term? It's like the idea that you have the architecture and you need to have a house. It's a bit American like that, I guess. But so it was really competitive. So the idea was I was supposed to destroy this with sound, which I did to a certain degree. But I also wanted to make it into kind of an event. And so we hired a really large sound system and put sound stacks on either side of this building. They closed the street off. They had all these media trucks with cranes and shit and stuff, and then we had a kind of a former biker bar across the street that the party was hanging out at, and then I don't know, like 2,000 people showed up. And so it turned into kind of this rock and roll event for architecture, destroying architecture. And then I also had some of my seismic sensors inside that were putting into the sound system. So it became this kind of rock and roll, like architecture on the stage, ridiculous project. And then we just performed it. And I think I would say it's probably the most sublime sound I ever made. It was such a purity of bass sound that was clamping down everything. That all you could hear was like this. You could hear the bass, of course, but then when people were talking, it's like your voice is through a line or frequency spectrum of this much, like a notch filter. So everyone sounded like they were like Mickey Mouse or something like that. Really strange. And when you perform outside, it gets really weird acoustics also. These are one of the machines inside the house. One of my sensors. These are the frequency controls for the motors. This project was sort of good. I was happy with it, but at the same time, it was a bit of a failure because we didn't actually destroy the house. We ended up burning out all the engines before we could manage to do that. But it was more like because it was sort of fast-tracked, and we had too many cooks in the kitchen. We had like about 3 or 4 different electricians who each had 3 or 4 different opinions, and so it got a bit too much. So anyways, it was a learning lesson, but it was still fun. Some more sensors, media trucks. Media. More media. People. Drunk Belgians afterwards at the biker bar. They were really happy. They're like, oh God, it's so great you came here. It's like, the whole country knows about us now. You know, it's like, they're like, ah. It was like, for one day, I was like kind of, it's nice. They were really friendly, nice, generous people. And of course the beer's always good. So, sponsored by The Dead, which is Google's drinkable brand. This was after it was destroyed. So afterwards, they actually had to destroy the rest of the house with a guy on a machine, a digging machine, who just kind of collapsed the house. And he was completely drunk. He was pretty amazing. That was where I was mostly fearing, actually, trying to get some of my equipment out while he's like crashing this building down. It was like totally nuts. Yeah, we took out some parts of it, put some cracks into it, but my machines burned out before we could actually do it. Yeah, so yeah, it was bittersweet. I mean, I always have the option's always open for future projects. So. I mean, it's a hard thing to try out because it's like you suddenly get a building you can work on, and then, like I said, I think I only had like 3 weeks to prepare it, and that wasn't very much time at all. I don't know if I. Well, this was a project that's in Berlin on the Brunnenstrasse number 9. Well, the building's not here. There is a building there now. I have sensors embedded into the building itself because the architects allowed me to do it. And then on the ground floor, there's a jack for your headphones. So you can just jack into this building and you can to the building as if it's a kind of monster microphone. And it was in the former East, so it's kind of a Stasi project. And listen to the neighbors kind of thing. I think here, this is the foundation before they built the building, and I did a performance. That's where they made a kind of iPod rip-off mock-up ad for me. That's the concept. These are some of the sensor rolls. This is called the Zhyskov Tower in Prague, or Zhyskov. Yeah, another David Cerny did these little stupid baby things falling on it. Kind of funny. Kind of ruins the architecture. Really nice, beautiful piece of 80s metabolist architecture from Soviet era kind of stuff. They allowed me to go in there. I wired up the building so you could hear this tower as a kind of ringing object. And then I set up a laser beam at the top, and then I modulated this laser beam with the sound. So the light is carrying the signal. It's like a giant visual wire. And I projected that wire maybe about 2 kilometers across the city to this fascist monument that the Nazis took over. Also, it's pretty strange program. But anyways, so I project that line of sound over there, and then I have a receiver on the other end. So that's the receiver. Basically a lens with a photo sensor that converts it back into sound, and then inside the building I have a kind of a sound system. So basically you go into this building, you listen, you get the live sound of that tower. And they were both called Zhyskov. There's a Zhyskov monument and Zhyskov tower. So I called it the, something in relation to that. So it's just another way of visually dealing with the kind of urban reality, sounds of 2 locations, leading one end to the other. The piece I can play some of it now. This relates to the seismological information that I gathered after the World Trade Center collapse. So when an earthquake happens, you see, whoa, that was a 3.4 on the Richter scale or whatever, and so you get this data. Basically, you can get data live pretty much anywhere in the world, whenever you want. But it's a kind of strange data. But anyways, I got the data from in and around New York City, New England, New Jersey, during the collapse of the World Trade Center and the impacts. And then I figured out a way to audify that. So that means basically taking that really low frequency and then pitch changing it up so that it's audible, and then stretching it out so that it became real time. And then I made an audio piece that you could basically listen to the whole event of what happened in the terrain of the earth. For me, I mean, some people have already been doing some similar work, mostly geologists, in order to listen to volcanoes and earthquakes and things like this. But I thought, for me, it's more interesting dealing with the kind of man-made events and how that impacts the earth. Because in a way, for me, that's quite interesting. I already know that the earth is a living object, of course, but for me, this is kind of, again, like the bell of the building, or the bell of the bell, the clapper of the bell. This was kind of a siren song, you might say, of an event that affected everyone on the globe, you might say. So the clapper was the collapse. And one interesting thing is, well, these are the sonograms that are made from the frequencies during the collapse. And when you make a sonogram of that, you actually kind of imprint the twin towers from the collapses. So that's just audio making that image. It's kind of weird. But one thing that was weird though, so what I have is I have a recording that's about 80 minutes long. The first part of the recording is of the 2 impacts, airplanes hitting, and I was playing around with the sound, and of course I could have just put it at any frequency I wanted. I ended up leaving it at a level that I know these seismological equipment can work at. But anyways, I tried it out, making it higher, and these twin towers basically acts like a tuning fork, like a giant tuning fork. So you know what a tuning fork is? You ring it and you can put it on a piano or whatever and tune your piano. But the twin towers actually were doing the same thing with airplanes. And So that was kind of a fascinating trip. And then